Hi, this is Megha Joshi, the host of the Boardroom Zen podcast. This show is created for the ambitious business leaders. Are you someone wanting to play big? Want to possess a strong brand and executive presence that makes you belong in every room you walk into? And all of this without putting your personal life on hold? If the answer to those questions is yes, then you are in the right place. In this show, I sit down with best-in-class leaders to distill their wisdom while sharing what helped me stand out as a Fortune 100 executive. So let's get started. All right. So here we go once again. Welcome everybody to this session on how to supercharge your executive presence. And I'm so excited and grateful that you've decided to join me. It means a lot. And I promise you, this is going to be a great session. It's going to be a value-packed session where you'll walk away with key insights you can immediately apply to yourself. So clearly, you've all heard the word or the term executive presence. And I can tell you by far, it's one of the most hyped up buzzwords or terms that I've heard in the past decade or so. And I had an interesting brush with this word, and I'll take you back onto that story in just a few. But I want to ask you a quick question. The question is, when you think of the term executive presence, and you think of a person that exuberates executive presence, what attributes come to mind? What attributes are you expecting to see in this leader or person? When I think of executive presence, the attribute that comes to mind is confidence. Somebody that's portraying confidence in how they conduct themselves. And I love stories, and I know you love stories. So let's take you back to a time in my own corporate journey, way back when I was a freshly minted business school graduate. And here I was walking out of the business school, and I took on this great job with a Big Four consulting firm, with Deloitte Consulting. And here I was working with top-notch clients from across the world. And they were paying big bucks for me to be there in their business, to be a management consultant who could advise and share a perspective on the situations or the problems they were dealing with, right? And so as I was moving along in my management consulting journey, I was obviously picking up the ropes and learning. And first few months went by. And then came time for my mid-year review. And I had an absolutely wonderful manager. So this day, I sit down with my manager, and he takes me through my performance review. And one big piece of feedback that he gave me in that moment was that I lacked executive presence. I did not have executive presence. And as I sat there in that moment, I was scratching my head and saying to myself, what the heck does executive presence mean in the world? I had a vague idea, but really, I didn't know what it truly meant, right? So in a very naive fashion, I asked my manager to explain to me what I needed to do to have more executive presence in my conversations. And so he simplistically explained to me that I needed to be more vocal. I needed to voice my opinion. I needed to be more confident about what I was saying. And so that made sense to me. And then the nerd in me went back to the hotel because we were clearly lodged at a client location. I was away from my home. And so that night, I went to my hotel room and I geeked out and I Googled the heck out of the word executive presence. So it's such a funny story, guys. And in hindsight, it feels very funny. But in that moment, it wasn't funny. I didn't know what it meant, and I truly wanted to be better at that. I was very achievement-driven from the get-go. And so as I searched and I read things on executive presence, two things started to emerge. Okay, so there's two big pillars to executive presence. The first pillar is basically nonverbal. You can call it nonverbal communication or you can call it appearances, right? Of how people see us. And that makes up how we dress up, how we walk, how we shake hands, how we sit. It's our body language. It's our eye contact. It's a whole lot of those things that are nonverbal that people pick on, right? So that was the first pillar that I learned about. And then as I explored more, the second pillar was verbal communication. The words we speak. It's the conviction with which we speak those words and what they mean. It's our ability to tell a story, or ability to take a lot of data and make sense of it and tell that story to whoever that we need to communicate that story to. And so I learned about these two big pillars. One was nonverbal communication, and then the other was verbal communication. And so that made more sense to me. I said, okay, if I put my mind to both of these pillars, I could get better, right? And so that's kind of how I started. That was my first brush with executive presence. And then from that point on, from that day on, I started to be more observant of how other partners or leaders or executives were behaving or showing up, or how their executive presence manifested, right? So I was paying attention to all of that. I was watching it. I was trying to figure out what worked for me, what behaviors I could emulate and get better. And so it worked for me. Over the years, I got better in terms of how I was bringing my true self to the table. And over time, I was very fortunate to be invited into some powerful boardrooms at the drop of a hat, where I just had to go in and present and be my confident self. And I delivered. And so that was the conventional way of looking at executive presence, right? Looking at nonverbals and verbals and using that to power up our executive presence. But today, I'm not here to teach you the conventional way. I'm here to teach you a different way, an out-of-the-box way, a more unconventional way of how you can improve and fire up your executive presence, okay? You can work the conventional way on those two pillars and it'll work for you. Trust me, it did for me for many years. But over time, as I was elevating my executive presence, there was a different way. And that's what I'm going to show you here. And so the unconventional way is to work on our energy. And as strange as that sounds, trust me, I'm a big believer in the energy that we carry as leaders or as human beings at large, okay? So let me give you an example so it'll become more clear to you, right? And I'm sure you've all been in that situation. There must have been a time where you were in a large meeting or boardroom or in a group setting where somebody or a leader walked in and you had no idea who that leader was. You didn't know their title. You didn't know them. They just showed up, right? And they didn't even utter a word, right? And in those few seconds of experiencing that leader's energy, you actually felt like this person was likable. You felt intrigued by that person. They had this unique, confident, and calming presence, right? They didn't even utter a word, but you feel their energy. You feel their presence, right? That's energy at work at its best. And let's look at the other example, the total opposite of this situation where somebody walks into the room and again, they haven't even opened their mouth yet. You are just looking at them walking into the room and settle into the room. And in a few moments of without even them opening their mouth, you feel this repulsion, right? And you feel their either arrogant or anxious energy that they brought into the room, right? So we as human beings, although we believe that we are listening to the spoken words, the presence of anybody, we feel their presence way beyond words, sometimes way beyond their actions, right? It is their energy, their core energy that we are experiencing, right? So the unconventional way is for us to work on our leadership energy and to make that shift so that energy shift can fuel our executive presence. It's a very different way of looking at executive presence. And I'm not saying you don't have to improve your nonverbals and your verbals. Yes, you absolutely have to. But if you shift your energy, that will naturally help you supercharge those two other dimensions that improve your executive presence, right? So I hope it makes sense so far. Let's unpack what we mean by this energy. And I'm sure it begs the question in your mind. So if it's about our leadership energy, how can I shift my energy to a more powerful, energetic presence? Where when I walk into a room, people aren't repelled by me. They want to experience my confident, calm demeanor. And so to be able to unpack that, now as an executive coach, I use a methodology that's created by IPEC. It's called the IPEC Code Energy Process. So basically by energy, we mean, as part of this process, we mean there are 7 different levels of energy. So level 1 through level 7, right? And as human beings, as leaders, we have different degrees of these 7 energies present in us at any moment. Like right now, I would be having a different distribution of these different 7 levels of energy in me. And to understand these levels of energy from 1 through 7, what you need to know is the lower levels of energy. So let's say level 1 or 2 will probably have more catabolic energy. And by catabolic energy, I mean negative, destructive energy, if you will. It's more of a tear down energy. And as we move up this level, these 7 levels of energy, the higher up you go in this energy spectrum, the more anabolic energy you have, which is more positive, inspiring, build up, constructive energy that we start to give out, that we put out, that people experience and pick on, right? And so in any moment, we are having different degrees of these 7 energies in our behavior. And so the premise of these different levels of energy is that our energy, or what people experience, it all starts with the core thought or the intention that we have in our mind, right? So when we approach any situation, clearly we are telling ourselves a story, or there is a thought, right, that comes to mind. And with that thought, when we approach that situation, biologically, our body creates more neurotransmitters or chemicals that then generate certain emotions, right? Emotions of joy, calm, confidence, or arrogance, or fear, right? That these emotions is something we all experience, anxiety. And so these thoughts turn into emotions in our body, right? And these emotions then drive the actions we take, consciously or unconsciously, right? A lot of the actions we take are unconscious. We don't even know we're doing it when we're in a meeting. We could be fiddling. We could be having a presence that unconsciously tells others that we are nervous or we are not confident in our skin. So the premise of this core energy process is that we have to start with the thought, right? We have to be very aware of the thought that we have, and that thought will then drive the emotion or feeling in our body, and that feeling or emotion will then drive the action that we take, right? So there's this thought, feeling, action continuum. And for every level of energy, the 7 levels of energy that I explained here very briefly, each level has a different thought, it has a different feeling, it has a different action, right? So if we can move up the energy spectrum to a higher level, we have a better outcome at whatever that we are trying to do. So let me very quickly try to explain 1 or 2 levels. Let's take an example. If, let's say, there is a big meeting in the boardroom and there is this leader that is supposed to go in, maybe present, or maybe they're just attending that meeting as a stakeholder. And so right before they go into the meeting, the thought that this leader has is that I don't have much control, right? That this leader is at the mercy of whatever's going to happen, right? They're probably fearful of a lot of work being dumped on them or decisions being made in that meeting that are not in their favor. right? So when this leader walks into that boardroom with this level 1 energy, which is more of the energy of feeling like a victim, right? When they experience that thought, then clearly the emotions that they chemically experience in their body would be anxiety. They would walk into that boardroom with a lot of anxiety, even if they try to cover up that anxiety with a smile or with other superficial ways of portraying confidence. Their body is experiencing anxiety and a feeling of helplessness or fear, right? And when somebody experiences that feeling of anxiety, imagine how they're going to show up in that meeting, right? They're going to be passive. They're going to lack enthusiasm. They're not going to allow themselves to fully express in that meeting, right? So the thought, right, which is the weak thought of not having control, will drive the emotion of anxiety, and that anxiety will drive their behavior of lack of enthusiasm or passiveness in that meeting. So clearly, they're not going to have any executive presence in that meeting, right? It's going to be in shambles. So now let's look at the second level of energy, which is level 2. So this leader that's walking into a boardroom with level 2 energy will probably be telling themselves this thought. The thought would be, I need to win. I just need to win. And it will likely be at the cost of you or other stakeholders. I just need to win. So for somebody that's going into that meeting with the thought that it's a zero-sum game, for them to win, somebody has to lose. Clearly, when they go in with that thought, what feelings or emotions do you think they're going to be experiencing? The emotions that they're going to have is they're going to be experiencing, a feeling of either superiority or aggression, right? Or arrogance. Their feelings will be, I am better. I just need to win, right? And so when they approach that meeting with that emotion, guess how they will show up? What their actions are going to look like? Their actions will likely include the use of force, right? They'll probably use a loud voice or a domineering presence, or they might even snap back or show other people down in that meeting to prove that they have power, that they have control. They might even say demeaning words to others that don't have as much power, right? That's level 2 energy. So clearly, as you can see, level 1 and 2 have a lot of catabolic energy, a lot of negative energy, which repels people. So when these leaders are walking into these boardrooms with that energy, without even uttering a word, people are feeling their presence. Trust me, we humans, we pick up on energy, and we pick up more so on non-verbal elements, right? And I don't know if you've heard about the research, but a lot of data and research has proven that over 90% of our communication as humans, it's non-verbal. It is not the spoken words. It is the body language. It's the eye contact. It's how we show up. It's the other things that people pick up, right? Even our eye movement, people can pick up. They don't even know they're picking up or anxious or fearful energy, but they do, right? And so that's how we leverage these levels of energy. And so today we don't have time to explore all these levels of energy, but I hope it's making sense. And I'll just give you an example of a higher level of energy, right? So let's talk about level 5 energy. A level 5 energy is a much more powerful level of energy for us to be present in, because when we are operating with that lens, we actually tell ourselves, hey, we need to create win-win situations. And we basically say, yes, I need to win, but I also want you to win, right? So that's level 5. And when leaders approach something with level 5 energy, when we are trying to create win-win situations for not just for us, not just for others, but for both of us, that's when the rubber hits the road. That's when those leaders start to show up with a very calm, confident presence. When those leaders aren't trying to just be in it for themselves, right? So I hope that makes sense, right? I don't have time to explain all the 7 levels, but the higher up you go in the energy spectrum, the more powerful your presence is. And with that, you are essentially moving the 2 levers of executive presence. Your non-verbals start to shift your body language without even intentionally trying to shift your body language. It shifts. You walk in with a more confident, calming presence, right? And also your verbal communication improves in that case. You talk the talk, you can very easily articulate ideas or stories or concepts. And by the way, these are not just hollow words when you walk in with a higher level of energy. These words that are spoken with conviction. There's a lot more deeper meaning to it, right? So we show up in a very different way when we move up the energy spectrum. And so that's the whole idea, right? If we can shift our energy from being in the lower levels to much higher levels of energy, that's when everything else around us starts to shift, including executive presence, right? And clearly, executive presence is something that we talk about. And in today's day and age, it's a buzzword, right? Everybody talks about executive presence. How do we shift it and improve? And the unconventional ways, shift your energy, shift your thought, right? Move to a higher level of energy spectrum, and everything else, the feelings will flow from that, and your actions will shift, and you will have a much more graceful, powerful executive presence. There is no better time than now to stop playing small and tap into your zone of genius. With a Boardroom Zen executive coach by your side, experience the game-changing transformation, both internally and externally. Find out more on boardroomzen.com. And thank you for listening to my show. It means so much to me. I'd love for you to subscribe and leave a review on your favorite listening platform. More power to you, and hope to see you soon.